Today, time for a universal service obligation for cash. Hello again, it's Martin North from Digital Finance Analytics. Well, today's post covering finance and property news with a distinctively Australian flavour. Well, the UK has really started to step out and discuss the future access to cash. This is a very relevant discussion also for Australia, given the closure of branches here. So it's worth understanding what's going on over there. In its new Behind the Headlines report called Shortchanged, How the Decline of Cash is Affecting Older People, published recently, Age UK warns that being cut off from cash and banking services is tantamount to being excluded from society and is a risk for many more of us than is often assumed. They say consumers should be given a guarantee that they will be able to access cash as they do with water, electricity and the postal service. In the UK, some 2.4 million people aged 65 and over rely on cash in their daily lives, according to Age UK. Cash use in purchases fell sharply during the pandemic as lockdowns reduced the options for spending. This accelerated a trend of falling use of notes and coins in transactions. Some people turned to digital channels for their banking for the first time if they were unable to leave home. However, Age UK says it would be a mistake to assume that everyone was willing or able to do their banking digitally. The pandemic had exposed the difficulties a lack of access to cash would create. For example, it points to the experience of Eileen, aged 72, who told the charity people were lovely and would do some shopping for us, but I didn't always have money in the house to pay them and I couldn't access money. The ATM in our village is nearly always empty. All these little things that we take for granted suddenly became huge problems. The charity said the vast majority of older people could manage their money themselves, but the rapid move to online banking and digital payments left them struggling with the technology. In turn, this meant they were at risk if being socially excluded. Older people who use cash in their local bank branch are finding it increasingly impossible to manage their money because more and more barriers are being put in their way, said Caroline Abrahams, charity director at Age UK. It's time for the government to recognise how important banknotes and coins are to our lives and to treat the cash system as the essential piece of infrastructure it is, just like utilities, post and broadband. The Treasury has thrown its weight behind the idea of cash back from local stores without having to make a purchase when ATMs are disappearing. And it wants the city regulator, the Financial Conduct Authority, to take the lead in securing the future of cash for consumers and small business owners who need it. Natalie Sinley, author of the Access to Cash Review and leader of a series of cash trials, said it was important that businesses still accepted cash rather than just concentrating on making sure bank branches and ATMs were available to provide them. Banks must guarantee access to cash for everyone. Almost 13,000 free-to-use cash machines in the UK closed between 2017 and 2020. Banks must move swiftly to guarantee access to money for everyone as the cash system in part of the UK veers towards market failure. Age UK warned that millions of UK citizens are cut off from cash and banking services. The lack of facilities is causing many to fall victim to financial abuse after being forced to rely on others to make transactions on their behalf, the charity found. And the charity wants government legislation to guarantee that a cash machine or bank branch remains within reasonable travelling distance of every home in the UK. Universal Service Obligations, or USOs, already exist for essential services including water, electricity, post, and more recently broadband. Age UK is calling on the government to urgently introduce a USO for cash. Abraham said, if the government is serious about building back better after the pandemic, then they must legislate to protect cash access within a reasonable travel distance of people's homes. This will not only help the millions of citizens of all ages who risk being excluded from society if cash is allowed to die, but can also help revitalise our high streets as local businesses strive to recover from the last nightmarish 15 months. Age UK's Financial Lives 2020 survey found that 2.4 million people aged 65 and over in the UK relied on cash for almost all of their day-to-day payments. That's about 1 in 5 older people. But the survey found millions were unable to access the cash they needed to pay for essentials thanks to the decline of high street banks and local ATMs. Almost 13,000 free-to-use cash machines closed between 2017 and 2020. That's a drop of nearly 24%. The problem is compounded by shops increasingly refusing to accept cash payments. And the survey found that 1/4 of respondents had been refused when they or someone on their behalf had tried to pay with cash. Gareth Shaw, the head of Money at Which, said cash continues to be a vital way to pay for millions of our people. And it is clear that if the rapid transition to digital payments is not handled carefully, some groups of people, including older and vulnerable consumers, will be unable to purchase essential products and services because they cannot access or pay with cash. Alongside the plummeting number of ATMs, banks are deserting many communities, with thousands of branches shut, reducing their hours or scheduled to close. In fact, since January 2015, 4,299 banks have been shut in the UK. And between 2012 and 2020, the southwest of England, the oldest region of the UK, had 33% of its bank and building society branches closed. That's the highest proportion in the country. Contrary to popular belief, the report stated it's not only rural areas suffering from declining cash access. Recent research by the Financial Conduct Authority found that areas classified as multicultural metropolitans witnessed the biggest decrease in free-to-use ATMs between March 2018 and 2020. In fact, last month, the Economic Secretary to the Treasury committed the government to protecting access to cash, announcing a consultation on legislation proposals this summer. A Treasury spokesperson said, "We've already legislated to make it easier for businesses of all sizes to offer cash back without a purchase, and in May we outlined the next stage in delivering on our pledge of legislation to protect access to cash for those who need it. Not having a bank nearby has had a profound effect." Rachel Pillar said she feels the bank is uninterested in the plight of her father, Bernard Harlock. "My father has banked with HSBC all his life, and he's too old to change the bank as he wouldn't cope with anything different. He keeps getting locked out of his account, and the bank asked him to travel 14 miles to Chesterfield, where there is a long walk on cobbles from the car park to the bank. He can't do this," she said. "There are so many passwords online that he can't remember them, and he struggles with a mobile, so can't access his account because the bank texts him a pass number each time. Telephone banking is also difficult because of the passwords and the fact he can't understand the people on the end of the phone. This means that he can no longer easily access his account without a lot of support. He can use the post office, but there is only one nearby. It has long queues and he can't stand for long. Not having a bank nearby has had a profound impact on him and made him feel that he's lost his independence. The bank is uninterested. For these elderly people who don't have trustworthy people to help them, this is a significant blow. Many are now keeping money at home, which makes them very vulnerable. It's quite scary watching the banks close." Lionel Berman, a 93-year-old retired museum curator in West Kirby in the Wirral, said, "I banked with Nationwide. We had a branch, but it closed, and the nearest is 11 miles away in Hazewell. I no longer drive, and we have no bus service. A taxi would cost £20 a return. Because I cannot pay cash into the bank, I walk around with up to £100 in my wallet, which makes me feel very vulnerable." And Sandra, Berman's 79-year-old wife, said, "We used to have 5 banks here and lots of ATMs, but now we just have 2 ATMs. It's quite scary watching the banks close and the ATMs being taken away. If they take these last 2 away, I have no idea how we'll access our money. We'd have to take a taxi to Hazewell all the time, but as the taxi can only be paid for with cash, that would be difficult if we run out. Lionel can't travel because he can hardly walk, so it's down to me. I have all my strength at the moment, but if I don't know what we'll do." But there are alternatives, as recent UK pilots have shown. Paying in a cheque, depositing cash and withdrawing money without being charged, all used to be easy in the bustling centre of Rochford in Essex. That was until the last bank in town closed its doors more than 3 years ago. Since then, the town's population of 20,000 people have needed to make more complex journeys for a simple financial task. That was too much for some of its elderly and vulnerable residents until now, when they've been given what the locals have described as a godsend. A new bank hub run by the post office and shared by 5 mainstream banks has opened in a former carpet shop just off the market square. Every weekday there is a counter service, an automatic deposit machine and a free-to-use ATM. And each day a member of staff from a different bank comes in to help with trickier transactions. One lady came in to say, "Thank you, you've changed my life." And that's not an understatement, said Richard Fleetwood, postmaster at the Rochford Bank Hub. On a busy market day, it's hard to find anyone, old or young, who's not relieved to have the new hub in town. "This is a really good thing for the community," says mother of 2 Lisa Saunders. "I do internet banking, but it is handy having somewhere here that you can go to." And young hairdresser Freya Draper said it makes paying in the cash tips she receives far less of a hassle. "Normally, I have to wait until the end of the month and go into Southend to pay it all in, but I can do it as and when now," she says. Rochford is one of 8 communities across the UK trialling different ways to ensure residents have access to cash. The pandemic has accelerated the closure of bank branches, the disappearance of free-to-use ATMs, and has cut the use of notes and coins. While cash use may be dwindling, research by the city regulator, the Financial Conduct Authority, found 5 million people in the UK are still dependent on it. Experience from Sweden also suggests shops will start refusing notes and coins if cash becomes economic to handle. The trials, which are funded by the UK's main banks and the post office, are testing ways to make it easier for small businesses and consumers to deposit and exchange cash without having to travel miles to the nearest bank. In Rochford, it's not just the bank hub that's being put to the test. A scheme run by a business called Shrap allows loose change to be loaded onto a card or an app instead of being given in small denomination copper and silver coins. The money can be saved, built up and then spent via the card or a phone in local shops. Traders like the idea of cutting the cost of handling cash, as well as not having to travel miles to pay it in. They'd also welcome cheaper bank charges, not something these trials are looking to address. Whatever the method of paying, the difficulties of recent lockdowns means they're grateful for consumers spending with them again. Anything that makes it more convenient, from a bank hub to a queue-free ATM, is welcome. If they want to give us cash or card, we're happy either way, said Tiffany Toby on the McCarthy's Baker Market stall. As long as we are getting our money, we are happy. The reality is that coins are becoming an infrequent way to pay. The Royal Mint in the UK has no plans to print any 2p or £2 coins for the next 10 years. Natalie Kenny, author of the Access to Cash Review, who is overseeing this project, says there is no reason to let cash die out. Cash remains critically important, not just as a backup when payment systems go down, but for millions of people who can't use digital payments, don't have reliable broadband or mobile coverage, or simply cannot afford or don't have access to wider banking services that many of us take for granted, she said. If small businesses can't literally pop out for 5 minutes and bank their takings, rather than drive to the next town, find a parking space, and then queue for 20 minutes, then it will hopefully stop businesses from deciding to go cashless because of the costs and hassle of banking cash. The trials will run until October, and she hopes the most successful ones will be adopted nationwide. And she's also calling for the government to legislate to ensure the long-term future of the cash infrastructure network. The Federation of Small Businesses is warning that small businesses should not be expected to act as an ATM in place of the banks without a financial incentive. But in Essex, there is pride among the locals that they are part of something new in the UK. Everything good starts in Rochford, said butcher Jason McRae. In fact, Rochford was said to be where King Henry VIII first set eyes on Anne Boleyn. That marriage ended badly. Everyone must hope the relationship today between consumers, traders and the financial institutions that serve them fares somewhat better. And so coming back to Australia, I think we need that same universal service obligation here, because we are seeing exactly the same phenomenon. We're seeing branches closing, less access to cash being made available, and more people being forced through to digital channels, which of course is convenient for the banks, but not necessarily for individuals. And I do think that older people generally find it harder, particularly when they're less mobile and less able to deal with the new technologies. So this is something which is really important, and it's something that I'll be coming back to in coming weeks and months. So I think this is a really important issue, and cash needs to remain part of the overall transaction mix into the future. A universal service obligation around cash is essential. I'm Martin North from Digital Finance Analytics. Many thanks for watching, and I'll see you again next time.